This is Mike Terrace at the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and I am here today I'm going to demonstrate or give you some background information about what I consider a very important place-based lesson about Alaska wildlife. And this one is based in habitat, and because to me, habitat is one of the most important things to understand about if you need to understand about wildlife, whether you're studying it or hunting it. Habitat is a very important aspect of learning or understanding animals. So this lesson, which is going to allow you to go outdoors, is about our 3 grouse species found in interior Alaska, or almost a big proportion of the state. In those, we do have 3 species. A lot of people don't know that. We have, these species fit in perfectly with succession, and succession is a term that we're going to focus on in this lesson. And succession is the natural and orderly change in plant and animal communities over time after a disturbance. And that's a lot for that definition, but you're going to learn about it throughout this lesson, and your students and kids are going to also learn about it by looking at our 3 grouse species. So the first bird I want to talk about, and what fits into the first stages of succession, like I talked about, after a disturbance, and a disturbance could be anything. It could be human caused or natural caused. One of our greatest disturbances that we have in the boreal forest, of course, is fire. So fire sets things back to the early stages of succession. And today we're out here in these agriculture fields, actually, but they replicate what many natural disturbances would do. And this is primary habitat. This is the beginning stages of succession, and it's the primary habitat for one of the first grouse species that I want to talk about, and that is the sharp-tailed grouse. So if I was looking for a sharp-tailed grouse and I had my students study the habitat and the food requirements of this bird by going online and looking on our Fish and Game website, then they would come up with something like this right here. Because these fields and these agriculture areas, especially around Delta Junction, that's primary habitat for these birds. But also, the natural replication of these fields is fire. So these birds thrive in burned areas, and also in alpine areas, in bog meadows where there's not a lot of trees. So that's the first bird that we're going to look at, and the bird that clearly fits in with the first stages of succession. And now we started out in the early stage of succession with the sharp-tailed grouse. And now if you look around, we are in kind of the middle section of the succession of the boreal forest. And behind me and all around me, you can see is an aspen stand. So aspen trees are one of the trees in that middle stage of succession. It could also be mixed in with birch and balsam poplars. But this is before, you can even see around here, spruce trees are starting to grow up underneath here. And eventually, spruce trees are going to take over this forest as soon as these aspens die. So this is all about succession and about habitat. So what habitat is this? What bird lives in this habitat? Out of our 3 grouse species, that is going to be the ruffed grouse. And ruffed grouse, what they're looking for, why are they in this aspen forest? Because they survive on aspen buds during the whole winter time. In addition to that, they also, when they have their broods, they like, right now, not all the leaves are on these trees, but they also like to have a thick understory of willows and alders. And you can see that these are all alder shrubs right here, because when these are all leafed out and when they're thick and they have their broods in the summertime, they can hide their broods in there, and they have some protection from aerial predators. So in addition to that, if you look on the ground, on the understory, we have a very good base of cranberry or lingonberry, what people will call low bush cranberry. We have a lot of dogwood or bunchberry, and there's some Labrador tea, there's rose hips in here. There's a lot of different foods for those grouse, and that is why this bird, and you can even see how well he blends in if you didn't see him before. This is a ruffed grouse sitting right here, and ruffed grouse have 2 phases. They have a red phase and a gray phase, and this is a gray phase bird. It really blends in with the forest, this type of forest. So this is the rough grouse. This is the middle stages of succession, and they absolutely have to have this for their survival. But we are now in the final stages of succession in the spruce, in the mature spruce forest. And if you look around at all, you can see behind me, there's very large spruce trees. These are we're in a very good drained soil. So these are all white spruce trees up here. And they are gonna end up culminating in the forest because all the aspens and the birch around here are getting very old, 100 years old or plus, and they're starting to die. And as soon as they die, the only thing that's gonna grow up under here is spruce trees, because spruce trees can grow up in the shade underneath the canopy of these alders under the canopy of these aspen and birch, but aspen and birch cannot grow in the shade like spruce do. So spruce ultimately take over the forest and become the final stages of forest without a disturbance. So what one of our grouse lives in this area. It's pretty obvious if you think of the name. They call it a spruce grouse for a reason. And spruce grouse, in the summertime, they're eating a lot of protein sources and berries like all the other animals, other grouse and birds out here. But as soon as wintertime comes, they start feeding on, and they live on spruce needles. So they need a spruce forest. This isn't a solid spruce forest. This is a mixed spruce forest and a little bit of aspen and birch, but that's perfectly fine. There's a lot of spruce trees in here for them to survive on. Now, I want a little story, because everybody knows spruce grouse. They call them spruce hens or spruce chickens. And a lot of people say how dumb they are. They call them a dumb bird because when you see them, sometimes they stand still and you can walk up on them and they don't move. But that's just a strategy they use, because predators key in on motion. So when animals don't move, and hares do the same thing, when an animal doesn't move, it's very difficult to see it. As soon as an animal moves, our predatory eyes pick it out, even in our peripheral vision. So you may not have noticed, and if you have noticed, good for you, you're a good predator. But if you haven't noticed, this spruce grouse that's sitting right in a tree next to me, if it had moved at all, you would have picked it up. But because it didn't move, you probably didn't even know it was sitting right above my shoulder. So that's partly camouflage, and it's partly strategy for survival. And the spruce grouse, you can see, this is a male. It's got a red eye comb and a dark chest, and it has a dark tail with a flared out, if it flared out, with a gold tipped tail. So this is the spruce grouse. Do some more research about it. Look exactly at the food that it needs and the habitat that it needs, and you'll be able to recreate its habitat.
Hi educators, this is Jen, also with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And today we're talking about what grouse goes where, a specific version of animal adaptations for succession. The goal is to get students to think about how forest succession is an important process to create wildlife habitat. So how do we do that? One way is to focus on a certain group of species, in our case grouse, and go outside and actually look at the habitat that they made, like Mike just demonstrated for us. Another way is to have your students do research on each species and actually model the habitat. So make a painting or a diorama or even a virtual collage of some sort to show what habitat might look like. And if you place those habitats right next to each other, what you end up with is something that looks like a forest succession timeline. So a couple of resources to help you. Our ecology cards are a great way to get some habitat clues about some of the species we're focusing on. And our website has species profiles for Alaska species, and it's a great place to get started on research. So we encourage you guys to try this fun and interactive way to start thinking about forests as home for wildlife.